Stop celebrating the ceasefire. I am going to tell you something today that mainstream media is not telling you. And by the end of this video, you will understand why the horror after the war is going to be bigger than the war itself. My name is Professor Morandi, and if you are new to this channel, I do not do headlines. I do not do propaganda. I do data. I do facts. And I do the analysis that connects the dots that everyone else misses. Today we are talking about the Strait of Hormuz. We are talking about the IEA's bombshell announcement on April 13th, 2026. And we are talking about a rolling supply shock that will make the past 2 months look like a warm-up. This video is long. It is detailed. It is uncomfortable. But if you watch it until the end, you will understand the global economy better than 99% of people. Let us begin. Let me take you back to April 13, 2026. The world was watching ceasefire negotiations. The world was watching diplomatic backchannels. And then, Fatih Birol, the head of the International Energy Agency, stepped in front of the cameras and said something that should have broken the internet. Here is his exact quote. I am going to say it again so it sinks in. During the month of April, nothing has been loaded from the Strait of Hormuz. Let me repeat that. Nothing. Zero. Nada. Zilch. Now you might think, surely that is an exaggeration. It is not. The IEA does not exaggerate. The IEA is the most conservative, data-driven energy organization on the planet. If Fatih Birol says nothing has been loaded, nothing has been loaded. March cargoes were loaded before the crisis escalated. But April is a complete blank slate. Not a single barrel of oil, not a single shipment of liquefied natural gas, not a single ton of petrochemicals, not a single bag of fertilizer. And here is the kicker. We are already halfway through April. Even if a miracle happens tomorrow, April is already a lost month. You cannot go back to April 1st and load it on April 15th. The world has already consumed that day's reserves. That day's supply is permanently gone. This is not a delay. This is a permanent loss. And that is what makes this crisis fundamentally different from anything we have seen in decades. Before I go any further, let me remind you, or teach you, why the Strait of Hormuz matters more than almost any other piece of water on Earth. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow channel between Iran and Oman. At its narrowest point, it is only 33 kilometers wide, about 21 miles. That is less than the distance from downtown Los Angeles to Santa Monica. But through that tiny strip of water passes approximately 20% of the world's oil. Every single day. Let me put that in perspective. That is 17 to 18 million barrels of oil per day, plus 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas, plus massive quantities of petrochemicals, plus urea and ammonia, the base ingredients for nitrogen fertilizers that feed the world. If the Strait of Hormuz is blocked for one day, the world loses 17 million barrels of oil. If it is blocked for 1 week, that is 120 million barrels. If it is blocked for 1 month, and we are already halfway there, that is over 500 million barrels of permanent supply loss. To give you a comparison, the entire Strategic Petroleum Reserve of the United States, the emergency stockpile that took decades to build, is about 350 million barrels. We have already lost more potential supply in 2 weeks than the entire U.S. emergency reserve. Think about that. Now, let me give you the data that the IEA also released, the data that almost no news outlet has reported properly. The IEA confirmed that over 80 energy facilities in the Gulf region have been impacted by this conflict. These are not just Iranian facilities. These are facilities across the entire Gulf, loading terminals, storage tanks, pipelines, compression stations, export jetties. And here is the terrifying part. More than 1/3 of those 80 facilities, over 30 facilities, have been severely damaged. What does severely damaged mean in practical terms? It means these facilities are not coming back online in days. They are not coming back online in weeks. Some of them will take months to repair. Some of them may need to be completely rebuilt. Let me give you an example. If a loading terminal's pumping station is destroyed, you cannot simply plug in a new pump. You need to rebuild the electrical infrastructure. You need to repressurize the pipelines. You need to recertify the safety systems. All of that takes time. All of that takes money. And all of that happens while the world is waiting for the oil that is not coming. And here is the geopolitical dimension that no one is talking about. Even if Iran agrees to a permanent ceasefire tomorrow, the damage has already been done to facilities on both sides of the strait. The United Arab Emirates has facilities that have been hit. Saudi Arabia has facilities that have been hit. Oman has facilities that have been hit. This is not a one-country problem. This is a regional infrastructure catastrophe. And regional infrastructure catastrophes do not get solved by a signed piece of paper. Now, I need you to understand a concept that will change how you see every economic crisis from now on. I call it the rolling supply shock. Here is how it works. Normally, when there is a disruption to supply, a hurricane, a strike, a pipeline explosion, the disruption is temporary. You lose a few days of production, but then you catch up. The supply that was not delivered on Monday gets delivered on Tuesday plus Wednesday. That is not what is happening here. In the case of the Strait of Hormuz, every single day that nothing is loaded creates a permanent hole in global supply. Why? Because the ships are not there. The cargoes are not scheduled. The crews are stranded. 20,000 seafarers, by the way, according to the UN International Maritime Organization, remain trapped in the Persian Gulf with no way to leave and no way to safely transit. But more importantly, the world does not stop consuming. Every day, the global economy consumes approximately 100 million barrels of oil. That consumption continues whether the strait is open or closed. And when you consume without replenishing, you draw down inventories. So what happens on day 15 of the blockade? You have lost 15 days of supply. What happens on day 30? You have lost 30 days of supply, and you cannot go back. The oil that was supposed to be loaded on April 1st is not sitting in a warehouse waiting for the blockade to end. It was never produced. It was never loaded. It was never shipped. It is gone forever. And here is the mathematical reality that should scare every policymaker in the world. Even if the blockade ends tomorrow, the supply chain will take weeks to restart. Ships need to reposition. Crews need to be brought back. Infrastructure needs to be inspected and repaired. So the actual gap between ceasefire signed and oil flowing normally is measured in weeks, not days. During those weeks, the world continues to consume, and the inventory draws continue, and prices continue to rise. That is the rolling supply shock. And we are only at the beginning. Now I am going to tell you the story that almost no news outlet is covering. And this is the story that will affect you directly, at the grocery store, at the dinner table, in your monthly budget. The story is fertilizer. The Strait of Hormuz is not just an oil choke point. It is a natural gas choke point. And natural gas is the primary input for nitrogen-based fertilizers, specifically urea and ammonia. Approximately 30% of the world's traded ammonia passes through the Strait of Hormuz. When the gas stops flowing, the fertilizer plants stop producing. When the fertilizer plants stop producing, the farmers cannot plant. And when the farmers cannot plant, the world does not eat. Now let me give you the timeline that should keep you up at night. The UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, the FAO, issued a warning on April 13th. I am going to read you their exact language. They said, "The clock is ticking. Farmers must make planting decisions now." What does that mean? It means that in the Northern Hemisphere, where most of the world's food is grown, April is planting season. Corn is planted in April. Wheat is planted in April. Rice is planted in April. Soybeans are planted in April. If a farmer does not have fertilizer in April, that farmer cannot plant in April. If a farmer cannot plant in April, there is no harvest in September. If there is no harvest in September, there is no food in October, November, December, January, February, March. We are not talking about next month's grocery prices. We are talking about the entire 2026 to 2027 agricultural cycle. We are talking about a potential food crisis that will make 2008 look like a minor inconvenience. And here is the data to back that up. The FAO's Food Price Index for March 2026 was stable. It had not yet reflected the Hormuz crisis. But the April index, which will be released in May, is going to show a spike. And the May, June, July indices will show a cascade. Because fertilizer shortages become crop failures, become food inflation, become hunger. This is not alarmism. This is agricultural economics 101. Now let me talk about oil prices, because this is where the supply shock hits the global economy directly and immediately. Before the crisis, Brent crude was trading around $75 to $80 per barrel. During the worst of the war, it spiked above $120. Then the ceasefire negotiations pushed it back down to around $95 to $100. But here is what the markets have not yet priced in: the April zero loading data. When the IEA's announcement is fully digested, and it will be over the next few days and weeks, you are going to see a second wave of price increases. I am projecting that Brent crude will hit $130 per barrel by the end of April. And if the blockade continues into May, $150 per barrel is not out of the question. Why? Because the global oil market is not a simple supply-demand equation. It is a just-in-time system. Refineries run on schedules. Tankers run on schedules. Inventories are kept lean because storage is expensive. When the just-in-time system breaks, there is no cushion. And here is the macroeconomic implication that should concern every single person watching this video. Higher oil prices mean higher inflation. Higher inflation means central banks cannot cut interest rates. Higher interest rates mean slower economic growth. Slower economic growth means job losses, business closures, and reduced government revenues. We were already fighting inflation for 3 years. We were already hoping for rate cuts in 2026. That hope is now dead. The Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, the Bank of England, none of them can cut rates with oil at $130 per barrel. Some of them may even need to raise rates again. The soft landing that everyone was celebrating is not happening. The rolling supply shock guarantees it. Every crisis has winners and losers. Let me tell you who they are. The losers are obvious. Europe, which is already in an industrial recession. Japan, which imports almost all of its energy. India, which is the world's third largest oil importer. And every low-income country in Africa and Asia that cannot afford to bid at higher prices. They will simply be priced out of the market. That means fuel shortages, electricity blackouts, and food rationing. But the winners are interesting. And this is where the geopolitical irony becomes almost absurd. The biggest winner is Russia. I want you to think about that. The United States is fighting a war against Iran. The United States has imposed a naval blockade on Iranian ports. And who benefits? Russia. Here is the data. The IEA reported on April 14th that Russia nearly doubled its oil export earnings in March, from approximately $10 billion to $19 billion. Russian oil exports climbed from 320,000 barrels per day in February to 7.1 million barrels per day in March. Why? Because the United States quietly eased sanctions on Russian oil. They needed to fill the gap left by Iranian exports. So the country that the US has been trying to isolate for 3 years is now making record profits from a war that the US is fighting. And where is that Russian oil going? To China and India. China and India are buying Russian crude at discounted rates, refining it, and selling the finished products to Europe. So European gasoline is indirectly funded by Russian oil. That is the absurdity of global energy markets. The second winner is the United States itself, specifically U.S. oil producers. Higher prices mean higher profits for American shale. The Permian Basin is pumping at record levels. But even U.S. production cannot fill the gap left by 17 million barrels per day from the Gulf. The third winner is no one. Because when the supply shock hits, everyone loses. Higher prices are not a win for anyone except the few oil exporters who are not caught in the conflict, and even they will face collateral damage from global recession. Now, I am going to give you practical advice, because my job is not just to inform you, my job is to prepare you. First, do not expect prices to drop back to normal. The oil price of $75 per barrel is gone. It is not coming back this year. It may not come back next year. The supply shock has permanently reset the baseline. Second, prepare for food inflation. If you have the ability to buy non-perishable goods in bulk, do it now. Rice, beans, flour, cooking oil, these prices are going up. And they are not coming down until the 2027 harvest at the earliest. Third, if you are an investor, do not chase the headline-driven rallies. The stock market is reacting to ceasefire news as if the crisis is over. It is not over. The supply shock has not even peaked. I am not giving financial advice, but I am telling you to be careful. Fourth, pay attention to the fertilizer story. When the mainstream media finally catches up to what the FAO has been saying, there will be panic. Do not be part of the panic. Be prepared. And finally, understand that this crisis is not natural. It is not an act of God. It is a man-made blockade. And as the FAO chief economist said, governments can resolve this. The question is whether they will, and how long it will take. Let me close with a concept I call the aftershock. During the war itself, the world was focused on the violence, the missiles, the casualties, the diplomacy. And that focus was justified. War is terrible. But economically, the war was a preview. The aftershock, the supply shock that we are now entering, is the main event, and it will last longer than the war. It will affect more people than the war, and it will reshape the global economy in ways that we are only beginning to understand. Here is what I mean. The war lasted in its most intense phase about 2 months. The supply shock will last at least 6 to 12 months, because even after the strait reopens, the infrastructure damage takes time to repair. Even after the ships start moving again, the inventories take time to rebuild. Even after the fertilizer arrives, the planting cycle cannot be restarted until the next season. We are looking at a prolonged period of elevated prices, reduced supplies, and economic strain. The ceasefire is not the end of the crisis. It is the beginning of a different crisis. The horror after the war is bigger than the war itself, and the data proves it. Let me summarize everything I have told you today. Number 1. The IEA confirmed that nothing has been loaded from the Strait of Hormuz in April. 0. Permanent supply loss. Number 2. Over 80 energy facilities have been impacted, and more than 1/3 are severely damaged. Months of repairs ahead. Number 3. The rolling supply shock means every day of blockade creates a permanent hole in global supply that cannot be filled. Number 4. The fertilizer crisis is the story no one is telling. April planting decisions determine 2026 harvests. No fertilizer now means no food later. Number 5. Oil prices will hit $130 to $150 per barrel. Inflation will return. Interest rate cuts are dead. Number 6. Russia is the absurd winner, doubling its oil earnings while the US fights Iran. Number 7. The aftershock is bigger than the war itself. We are only at the beginning. If you have made it to this point, you are part of the 1% of people who actually understand what is happening in the global economy. And I need you to do 3 things right now. First, hit the like button. This video took hours of research and analysis. The algorithm rewards engagement. A like tells YouTube that this content matters. Second, subscribe to this channel. Turn on the notification bell. I am Professor Morandi. I do not post every day. I post when there is something worth saying. And the next few weeks will have many things worth saying. Do not miss them. Third, share this video with one person who needs to hear it. A family member, a colleague, someone who is confused about why their grocery bill is going up, someone who thinks the ceasefire means everything is fine. Send them this video. The world is changing. Most people will be caught off guard. You will not. Because you watch this channel. I am Professor Morandi. Stay informed, stay ahead, and I will see you in the next video.